The last moments of Beneath the Planet of the Apes pretty conclusively ended the franchise. Its hero, Charlton Heston, was shot and dying, and his final breath managed to push a button that blew up the entire planet. Where do you possibly go from there? Well, unfortunately, the movie was a really big hit. So producer Arthur P. Jacobs sent a telegram to screenwriter Paul Dean that simply said, "Apes exist, sequel required." What Paul Dean came up with was one of the bravest, strangest, and most oddball directions a franchise has ever taken, and maybe the reason why this is my favorite franchise of all time. My name is Devin Faraci, and this is Badass Digest. So the third film in the series is called Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and Paul Dean was met with a couple of challenges, one of which is the fact that the entire planet blew up and every single character was dead. And he had kind of a great insight, which is that Cornelius and Zira, who were the good chimpanzee characters from the first two films, weren't actually present at the final bloodletting. Cornelius and Zira were just assumed dead when the entire planet blew up. So he had this brainstorm. What if Cornelius and Zira actually, while everybody else was fighting in the mutant underground, were repairing Taylor's spaceship from the original Planet of the Apes? What if they had been able to make it work, took off into space, and managed to get off the planet just before it blew up? And what if the shockwave from that explosion somehow, and who knows, it's a Planet of the Apes movie, sent them back in time? See, because the thing is, back in the 70s, when you made a sequel to a movie, unlike today, they actually just kept making them cheaper and cheaper. So Dean had a more limited budget to work with, and by sending them back in time to 1973, pretty much the modern day at the time, he was able to avoid the problem of having all these expensive extras and ape masks. Escape from the Planet of the Apes is kind of a fascinating movie in a lot of ways. It begins as more or less a comedy. It's a fish out of water movie, but at the same time, it's a Planet of the Apes movie, so things are going to have to get dark pretty quickly. There are some hearings held about who these apes are, and during the course of the hearings, it slowly becomes clear that they are not just from the future, but they're from a future where apes have enslaved men. And so the President of the United States is stuck with a problem. Here he has two apes from the future who represent a world where humanity is underneath the heel of the ape. What's he gonna do with them? You know, the 21st century, we're very used to fan service and all kinds of great little continuity nods. That was much rarer back then. And there's another character introduced into this movie. This new character is, I think, one of the great continuity nods of all time. His name is Dr. Otto Hasslein. And if you're a real Planet of the Apes fan, you're going to recognize that name, because when Charlton Heston's Taylor crash lands in the first movie, and they see that they're actually living 1,000 years in the future, he makes mention that it proves Dr. Hasslein's theory of time travel, which is incredible because that character now shows up in this third movie. But the thing about Dr. Otto Hasslein is he's kind of an and Hasslein discovers that Zira has come to our time already pregnant. That's where the movie takes a really dark turn. The US government tries to force Zira to have an abortion. Cornelius won't stand for it. They escape, they go on the run, they're hunted down, and in the final moments of the movie, in a series that I think is really notable for having some of the darkest endings imaginable, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which began as a comedy, has one of the darkest endings I've ever seen in a major motion picture. Cornelius and Zira have taken refuge in an abandoned shipyard. Cornelius is shot dead. Zira is also shot, and they gun the baby to death on screen in a G-rated movie. It's mind-blowing how dark this is. In her last moment, she throws her baby off the side of the boat into the ocean, hoping that it can get away. A real Moses metaphor. It's got another twist on top of it. Earlier in the film, we have been introduced to a character named Armando, a kindly circus owner played by none other than Ricardo Montalban, Khan himself. It turns out Armando is running this circus where there's been a newborn baby chimp, and Zira secretly swaps her baby with the newborn baby. The final shot of the movie is that baby standing up in a cage and saying one word, mama, again and again and again. Mama. In Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, that baby grows up to be Caesar. What's really cool about this is that Dean has set up a situation where he's created a time loop. Because how did the apes evolve from men? Well, it turns out that some evolved apes went back in time and left the baby there. It's totally a closed time loop. It doesn't make any sense. It's really neat. It's kind of a real mind bender, but it wasn't always there. In an original version of the script, Armando's circus had another chimpanzee in it. And that other chimpanzee was dying because its brain was too big. And Armando has a line of dialogue about how all over the world baby chimpanzees were being born whose brains were too big. This sort of points to the idea that evolution was already happening. Super intelligent apes were already happening right now in the modern day. By cutting that, Caesar coming back in time becomes the single catalyst for for all talking apes in the future. Escape from the Planet of the Apes wasn't as big a hit as the previous two. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, this is a movie with just 2 apes in it. The big sci-fi stuff is gone. It's much more a smaller love story. It's a bigger downer than any of the previous Apes movies, which is saying a lot. That probably hurt it as well. But I feel like this movie just didn't appeal to kids in the same way. But it did make enough money for another sequel. And so a couple of years later, Ricardo Montalban will be back. Roddy McDowall will return, this time playing the son of his own character, and the greatest Planet of the Apes movie we made, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. If you guys want to talk about that, let us know in the comments below. Let me know what other franchises you want me to talk about. We're reaching the end of the Planet of the Apes series really soon. There's other great franchises out there. What should we be talking about in the future? Subscribe so you don't miss a single episode going forward. Share this with all your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and be back here again next week where I'll be doing something totally different, just as badass as this. My name is Devin Faraci, and this is Badass Digest. This isn't best to worst or anything like that. These are just 8 fantasy movies that I think are incredible.
Get your film fix. Subscribe to CineFix.